Marjorie Ockley came up the footpath with her father's shovel on her shoulder and stopped, because 3 men were standing in the one place she had walked 4 miles to look at. She had 4 shillings knotted into the corner of her shawl. The room she slept in above a wheelwright's shop was promised to a Hayward's family from Saturday, and Saturday was 3 days off, and after Saturday there was the road and the hiring at Michaelmas, and nothing whatever in between. She had been going to the mill to ask for work turning sacks. The path ran along the top of the meadow, and she had stopped at the meadow the way a hungry woman stops at a window. It was the 2nd week of June, and the grass on it was not worth cutting. The 3 men stood at the head of the water, where the river came down off the chalk, and a hatch of elm boards sat in a stone throat to take part of the flow out of the river and into the long channel that fed the ground. The boards were down. They had the look of boards that had been down a long while. "That is thistle to the far hedge," Marjorie said. The oldest of the 3 turned round. He had a crook and a beard gone the colour of tallow, and he looked at her without any surprise at all. "It is," he said. "There is more of it every year, and I am obliged to walk my ewes through it." "Reuben," said the man in the good coat, "we are not here to discuss thistles with persons off the road." "Then we are here to discuss them with each other," the shepherd said. "And we have done that for 9 years, Mr. Bicknell, and the thistles are still there." The 3rd man had said nothing. He was younger than the agent and taller than the shepherd, and he stood with his hands behind him, looking down the meadow as though it were a room he had walked into by mistake. He wore no coat. He had been holding a hatchboard, and his cuffs were wet. "You know the ground," he said to Marjorie. "I know that ground," she said. "Not that one. Any ground of that kind. Then tell me what is wrong with it." Bicknell laughed once, the way a man laughs to put a wall up. "Your Grace, this is a girl with a shovel." "It is a drowner's shovel," Marjorie said. "That is the trade. A drowner is the man who floats a water meadow, who takes the river out over the grass in the cold months and lets it off again, so the ground gets the first bite 3 weeks before anybody else's. My father was one. There were 11 of us in this valley when he was young. And now? Now there is me," she said, "and one at the far end who is past it." The Duke of Corvedale looked at her for a moment. Then he said, "Tell me what is wrong with it," again exactly as before, and something in the flatness of it made her put the shovel down. "That channel along the top," she said, and pointed with her chin. "The carrier. It is the artery of the whole thing. The river goes into it at this hatch, and it carries the water along the high side and lets it down over the ground in little gutters. Yours is not carrying, it is holding. It has silted up until it has no fall left in it, and water with no fall in it does not run, it lies. Look where the rushes are. Rushes come where water lies. Go on. Your board's here." She stepped down the bank and put 2 fingers on the elm. "That is dry moss. River moss is black and it slimes your hand. That moss has had a dry summer and a dry summer before it. These boards have not been lifted in years." Bicknell said, "The hatch is drawn in the season, as it always is." "Then the moss is lying," Marjorie said, and did not look at him. "And the ridges," she said. "A meadow like this is made into long, low ridges, with a gutter running the length of each crown, so the water comes up out of the gutter and goes down both faces of the ridge in a sheet, and never stands anywhere, and never has time to sour anything. Yours have gone flat." There is 100 years of somebody's work under this thistle, and it has been let go soft. And your drains at the bottom are blind, so what little wet comes down cannot get away to the river again, and it stops there and rots the roots out. That is your bare patch by the willow. That is not drought. That is standing water in a dry year, which is the worst thing that can happen to grass. Any farmer could say as much, said Bicknell. No farmer has, said the shepherd. Marjorie straightened up. There is one more thing wrong with it, she said. And it is not the meadow. Corvedale said. Say it. You have been paying somebody to do a job that nobody has done since before I was grown, she said. Carriers are scoured every year. Every drowner's account in England has scouring in it, because it is the whole of the work. If any man had put a shovel into this channel in the last 9 years, there would be a heap of mud on that bank the length of a barn. There is no heap. There is nothing here but grass grown over old mud. The work has been charged, and the work has not been done, and I do not know who by, and it is not my business who by. Nobody said anything at all. A yellowhammer went on with its noise in the hedge, as though the morning were ordinary. What is your name? Said Corvedale. Marjorie Ockley. How long to put it right? 3 years to have it right, 1 winter to have it worth something. I would want 6 men through July and August, and the loan of a horse. You are hired, he said. Bicknell said, Your Grace, and Corvedale said, You will make her a place in the accounts, Mr. Bicknell, without turning his head. And that was all the answer he got. Marjorie picked up the shovel and held it across her body like a bar. One condition, she said, and I will not come without it. I set the water. Nobody lifts a board and nobody drops one but me. Not the shepherd, not your agent, not you. If a hatch is moved behind my back, I cannot tell you what this ground has had and what it wants, and then I am no use to you. And I would go. Nobody but you, said Corvedale. Say it to him as well, she said, not only to me. So he said it again, to Bicknell, in the same flat voice, and the agent inclined his head about an inch, and the sun came off the water at the hatch, and made a shape on the stone like something breathing, and that was the whole of it. That was how she was taken on. Her father had been drowner to a house 11 miles up the same river, and had taught her because there was nobody else to teach, and because he liked company at 4 in the morning. She had held the lantern at 7 years old. She had carried the sack of turves at 9. At 13 she could set a gutter by eye and be within an inch, and he had shown her off to men who thought it was a trick, like a dog counting. He died in the spring she was 20, of an obstruction of the bowel, in 11 days, in a bed she could see the meadow from. The house he served put the meadows down to plain pasture within the year, because floating wanted a man who knew it, and a man who knew it wanted paying, and pasture wanted neither. After that, she had done what there was: weeding, stone picking, 3 seasons of hay, a winter in a laundry that had taken the skin off her forearms. She had asked for drowner's work at 4 estates, and had been laughed at twice, refused kindly once, and once told to come back as a man. She was 23, and she had no people and nothing to lose that had not already gone, which is a thing that makes some women frightened, and had made her the other way. On the Friday she carried her box down from the wheelwrights, and it was not heavy. The cottage they gave her stood at the head of the water, 40 yards from the hatch, and it had been the drowner's cottage since the last century. It had a stone floor and a smell of cold soot, and a wren's nest in the chimney that she left where it was. There was a bed frame with no bed in it. There was a shelf with a broken lantern glass on it, and a tally stick nobody had cut for years. Bicknell brought the key himself, which surprised her. "I have written you into the book," he said. "1 shilling a day and the cottage, no beer, no meat. It is more than a woman is paid anywhere in this county, and I will thank you to remember that when you are asked." "I will remember it," said Marjorie. "You have made a bold beginning," he said. Some men would call it forward. Standing on a bank telling a duke his business. "He asked me twice. He asks a great many people a great many things," Bicknell said. "It is his way when he is out of humour. It signifies nothing, and it is soon over. I have served this estate 19 years, Miss Ockley, and I have watched a great deal of enthusiasm come up that path and go back down it." He said it pleasantly. He had a pleasant, well-kept voice, like a room kept warm for visitors. "There is no money. That is the whole of the estate in 5 words. There is no money, and there has been none since his father, and what a place in that condition wants is quiet management, not works." "It wants grass," said Marjorie. "It wants economy. You cannot economize a ewe into lambing," she said, "and you have 400 where you had 1,000, and the reason you have 400 is that they come off this valley in March with nothing in them. That is what an early bite is for. Grass in March is worth 4 times grass in June, because in June the whole world has grass." Bicknell put the key on the shelf, beside the lantern glass. "Do not overtire yourself," he said, and went away down the path, and she stood in the doorway and watched him go and understood, without any drama about it, that she had made an enemy on a Wednesday morning by talking about moss. She walked the system that afternoon and the whole of the next day, and it was worse than she had said, and better than she had feared. Worse, because the main carrier was silted to above her knee for the best part of a mile, and the mud had grass rooted in it, which meant years and not seasons. Worse, because 2 of the smaller hatches down the meadow had rotted out entirely, and somebody had stopped the gaps with a hurdle and a dead furze bush. Better, because the fall was still there. Under the mud the old floor of the channel lay, as the men of 100 years before had set it, running down from the head at about an inch in the chain, which is a slope a man cannot see and water can feel, and that is the whole art of the thing. Nobody had smashed it. Nobody had ploughed it. It was all there, asleep under mud, waiting for somebody to take the mud off. She sat on the bank at the low end, where the drains ran back to the river, and she ate a piece of bread and looked at it, and she thought about her father saying that a meadow does not die, it only stops being asked. "You will want carts," said the shepherd from behind her. "I will want 6 men and I will get 3, she said. "You will get 4. I am one of them, 3 days a week, if the ewes will let me." He sat down on the bank with the ease of a man who had sat down on a great many banks, Reuben, head shepherd, and everything else there is no money for. "You had better know at once that I talk. My wife died 6 years ago, and I have got into the way of saying everything out loud to the dog, and the dog is not particular, and now nor am I. I am not much for talk," said Marjorie. "No," Reuben agreed comfortably. "That is why it will suit." He looked out over the meadow and clicked his tongue at it. "I will tell you the thing you are wondering," he said. "It runs down the valley, and it will reach you by Sunday, so you may as well have it right. He is 31. He came into it at 19, and there was nothing in it but debt. and he has sold his father's pictures and his father's horses and his father's house in town. And he lives in 4 rooms of 40, and he has not been to London in 6 years. He is not proud. Everybody says he is proud. Proud is what people say about a man who does not explain himself. That is his business, said Marjorie. It is, said Reuben. And there is another piece of it that is not, and I am not going to tell you that today, because you have the mud to think of. The mud, in the end, took 41 days. There is no way to make that pretty, and she never tried. 2 men in the channel and 2 on the bank, and the shovel going down through the mud until it grated on the old floor, and the mud coming up in 1/200-weight lumps that had to be thrown clear over the shoulder onto the bank, and then thrown again, back from the edge, because a bank loaded at the lip will slump into the cut, and you will do it all twice. The stink came up in the first week and stopped by the 3rd. There were eels in it. There were 3 horseshoes, a shoe buckle, and a clay pipe with the ball hole. And along the bank, all that summer, the heap grew. 9 years of settled river laid out in the sun in a long dark ridge, going grey on the outside, going green on the top where the seeds got into it, the length of a barn and then the length of 2. Corvedale came on the 4th day and stood watching from the path. On the 9th day, he came down the bank in his shirt sleeves and put his hand out for the shovel. That is not necessary, Marjorie said. It is not necessary that you should be doing it either, he said, and here we both are. He was better at it than she expected, and she said so, and he said his father had made him cut and lay a hedge every winter of his boyhood on the theory that a landlord who could not do a thing would be cheated over it. Then he said nothing else for 2 hours, and worked steadily, and when he climbed out his forearms were black to the elbow, and he looked at them with a kind of satisfaction that had nothing to do with her. The first time they were alone together in a room was the last night of June, in the estate room, which had a great table in it, and 8 chairs and no fire, and a map of the whole property varnished to the colour of weak tea. The meadows, Corvedale said, and put his finger on them. May I? Said Marjorie, and turned the map round to face herself, which no one had done in that room in his lifetime. She took him through it in order, because that was how she had it in her head. The head hatch first, which governed everything. Then the main carrier, the mile of it, and how far she had got, and what it would cost to finish, which was £30 in wages, and nothing else because the labour was all of it. Then the 2 rotten hatches down the ground, which wanted elm, and elm meant timber, and the estate had elm standing in its own hedges and no sawyer. Then we will have a sawyer, he said. Then that is £9, she said, and I would rather have the sawyer than the horse. Take both, go on. The ridges want making up again, and that is autumn work, and it is turf and barrow, and it is slow, and the drains at the bottom want cutting out before anything else at all, because if the water cannot get away, I would be doing you harm and not good, and I would sooner not start. How long before I see anything? You will see nothing until February, Marjorie said, and in February you will see the ground green when everything the other side of that hedge is grey, and you will get your ewes onto it a fortnight before your neighbours, and they will lamb better on it. And that is the whole return, and it is worth more than it sounds. It sounds like a fortnight. It is a fortnight in March, she said. A fortnight in March is not the same commodity as a fortnight in August. He almost smiled. She saw it go across and go off again, like weather on a hill. Mr. Bicknell says there is no money, she said. Mr. Bicknell is right, said Corvedale. There is no money. There is £30 and £9 and the loan of a horse, because I have decided there is, and something else will not be done instead. Do not ask me what. I was not going to. No, he said. You are the first person in 11 years who has come into this room and told me what a thing costs before I asked. He rolled the map up himself. At the door he stopped with it under his arm. The hatch, he said. Your condition. I have not forgotten it. I did not think you had, said Marjorie, and that was the whole of the first meeting, and no part of it was about anything but work. And she lay awake for an hour afterwards for no reason she was prepared to give. The trouble with Silas came in the second week of the mud. He was the carter, a wide, slow man of 50 with a hurdle-maker's hands, and he had been told to bring the cart down to the meadow 3 mornings a week, and for 3 mornings a week he had brought it late, and stood by the horse's head, and let his silence do the work. On the Thursday he did not come at all, and Marjorie walked up to the yard at noon with the mud drying on her arms, and found him sitting on the shaft, eating an onion. The cart, she said. Mr. Bicknell had me at the Ricks. He had you at the Ricks on Tuesday. Silas took another bite of the onion and looked at the middle distance. There is a way things are done here, he said. Tell me it then. You want the truth of it? I would be glad of it, said Marjorie. I have not had much of it lately, and I have got the time while you finish that onion. Silas put the onion down. My father carted for Old Hallows on that same meadow, he said, 40 years, and I have watched that ground go to thistle every year since, and been told there was no call for it. No call for it. It does not pay. And now there is a girl in the ditch, and suddenly there is a horse, and suddenly there is £9 for elm. And my father is dead, and my back is what it is, and I am to go up and down the meadow like a boy again for somebody who was not born when it was let go. He stopped, and then said, more quietly, and it will not last the winter. Nothing here lasts the winter. And I shall have got my hopes up for a second time, and I am too old to be doing that. Marjorie sat down on the other shaft. It might not last, she said. That is fair. If he sells the meadows in October, I am off down that road with a box and you are still here. So you have the worst end of it, and I will not pretend otherwise. That is not much of a speech. It is not a speech at all, she said. But there is one thing I can promise you, and it is this. Whatever happens to me, that carrier will be open. It will be open in 50 years. Somebody will find it open and wonder who did it, and put a board across the head and take the water out. And it will run, because the fall is still in it, and nobody can take that out but a plough. Your father carted the mud out of it once. It is going out again. That much is done whatever comes after, and it will be done with your cart, and I would rather it was you than a stranger. Silas looked at the horse for a while. 6:30, he said. Not 7, 6:30, and I will want a boy to hold the head at the corner, because that corner is wicked with a full load. You shall have me, said Marjorie. You will be in the ditch. Then you shall have the shepherd, and he will talk to you the whole way down. God help me, said Silas, and picked up the onion again, and from that morning the cart was at the head of the meadow at 6:30, and once, in August, without saying anything about it, he brought her a barrow with a new wheel in it to replace the one she had been nursing along with wire. It was Reuben who told her about Halloweyes, in the fold on a hot Sunday in July, with the shears going in the pen behind them. You will have heard the name by now, Reuben said. Silas said it. I did not ask. No, you would not. He wedged a ewe between his knees and got on with her feet. Hallowes was drowner here for 31 years. He was drowner to his father and then to him, and he taught the young one the ground when he was a boy, which his father never did, being in London. Hallowes was the one who carried him up this valley on his shoulders and showed him where the water went. And in the march he came into it, the river came up. Not a great flood, a middling one, the sort we have every few years. Reuben let the ewe go and straightened. Hallowes wanted the low ground let under. That is what the low ground is for. You spread a flood thin over 40 acres, and it lies an inch deep and does no harm and goes off. And that is instead of it going down the valley in one lump and taking the bank out at the bend and cutting a gravel scar through the middle of the best meadow in the parish. That is right, said Marjorie. That is what I would have said. There were 9 tenants' worth of hay in the low ground, and it was not up yet, and the boy was 19 and had been 3 weeks in possession, and there was a room full of men waiting for him to be somebody. Reuben rubbed his face. So he stood on the bank in front of the whole estate and told Hallowes he was wrong. Told him he had grown careless. Told him he would not have his tenants drowned to save a drowner trouble, and said it in that voice he has got, that flat one, that sounds like a thing being read out. And Hallowes said, Sir, I have known this water since before your father. And he said, And I have known it since I could walk, and I am telling you, it will hold. It did not hold. It went at 2 in the morning, and it cut a channel through the middle meadow you could have laid a cart in, and the gravel is under that ground yet, and that is the bare patch by the willow you were asking after, and it will be bare when we are all dead. Reuben picked up the shears, and then, because he could not stand in front of that room a second time, he turned Hallowes off. In April, a man of 62 with 31 years of it, and he stood on the same bank and said the fault was in the management of the meadow. And after, Hallowes went to his daughter at Ilsington and did not get another place, because who takes a drowner turned off for the loss of a meadow? He lived 3 years. The young one paid him a pension out of his own pocket to the last quarter day and never said so to anybody, and I only know because I carried it twice. Reuben looked up, but he never went and said the other thing. And Hallowes died waiting for it, if you want the truth, and I have never once heard that name said in that house since, and there are people there who do not know it was ever anybody's name. Marjorie sat very still on the hurdle. That is why the meadows were let go, she said. That is why the meadows were let go, said Reuben. Bicknell will tell you it was economy. It was not economy. It was a man not being able to look at a field. The bridge appeared on the last day of July. The low end of the meadow was cut off from the head by the carrier itself, which was a full mile round by the ford, and she went round it 8 or 10 times a day, and had said so exactly once, to nobody in particular, in the way of a person totting up an hour she was not going to get back. And on the Tuesday, there was a bridge, 2 elm planks, sawn from the same stick as the new hatchboards, laid on a stone footing that somebody had built dry and built properly, at the precise point where the grass was worn down to the mud, from a summer of her standing looking at the far side of it. She stood on the near bank for some time, then she crossed it, and went on with her day, and said nothing to him about it, and he said nothing to her, and neither of them ever mentioned it again as long as they lived. He watched her more than she knew. Once from the top of the rise, when she went into the water at the head to feel along the sill of the hatch with her bare feet, because she did not trust her eyes on it, and stood there in the river, up to her thighs, for a quarter of an hour, with her skirts knotted, and her face perfectly blank, working the whole width of it, inch by inch. He had gone up there to think about a letter from his bank. He came down without having thought about it at all. Once when she carried Dorcas Prideaux's water for her, that was in the 2nd week of August, and it was not a thing anybody was meant to see. Dorcas had the cottage at the low end, and a husband 10 years dead, and a bad hip, and a well that had gone brackish. So she fetched from the spring by the withy bed 200 yards, and she took a rest halfway, whether she wanted one or not. Marjorie came up behind her with the shovel, took both buckets without asking, carried them to the door, and set them inside on the flags where they would be cool. Then she went back and cut out the little blind drain at the corner of Dorcas's garden that had been letting the wet stand in her potatoes for 4 years, which took her 35 minutes and made her late. Corvedale watched all of it from the lane, where he had stopped because his horse had cast a shoe, and did not go in, and did not speak. What it did to him was simple, and he could not get round it. He had been holding, for 11 years, a private opinion that people were kind in front of people. He knew it was a mean opinion, and he had never been able to shift it. And now it had been shifted, on a Tuesday, by a woman who had not known he was there, and who was going to be late for her dinner. The second thing was smaller and worse. It came to him as he rode home that nobody had done anything of that kind for him since he was 19, and that it was entirely his own doing, and that a man may arrange his whole life so as never to be contradicted, and then be surprised to find nobody within a mile of him. The shovel was the second gift. It had been her father's, and the blade was worn to a crescent, and the iron shoe on it was thin as a wafer, and in the 1st week of August the shaft finally split at the throat, and she bound it with wire and went on. She did not say anything to anybody. There was nothing to say. It was a shovel. On the Friday it was gone from where she left it against the cottage wall, and on the Saturday it was back, with the split scarfed and glued and bound in brass, and a new iron shoe on the blade, hammered thin at the edge the way the old one had worn itself thin, and the crescent left exactly as it was. Nobody had made her a new one. That was the thing she kept coming back to. A new one would have been a kindness, and she would have thanked him for it politely, and it would have been like a stone in her boot for the rest of her life, because it would have been a new shovel. And somebody, somewhere in that house, had understood that, and had told the smith to keep the shape of the ware. Reuben said, "That is a handsome bit of brass," and she said, "It is," and went on down the bank, and worked until it was too dark to see, and did not trust herself to eat with anybody that night. There was a heron that summer that ruined a good deal of her work and all of her arguments. It stood in the carrier where the water came out of the head, in the exact place she had cut a level mark on a post to read the river by, and every time she came down the bank at first light it went up off the water like a wet umbrella opening, and put its feet through the fresh turf of whatever she had made the day before. "He is fishing," said Corvedale. "There is nothing in there to fish for. Then he is an optimist, and I will not have him disparaged. They were sitting on the bank above the head at noon, on a burning Wednesday, with the men gone off to their dinners under the hedge. Marjorie had a piece of bread and a piece of cheese. He had a piece of the same bread, because he had asked Silas for it, and Silas had given it to him, and this had gone round the whole estate by tea-time. "He wants a name," Corverdale said. "He does not want a name. He is a bird. Everything on this property has a name. The ewes have names. The ewes have not got names, they have got numbers, and the shepherd calls them all Maudie because he cannot see across the fold any more. Then that is a name," he said, "and it is a great deal better than nothing, and I am giving the heron one. He shall be called the Commissioner." Marjorie put her bread down. "Why the Commissioner?" "Because he stands in the middle of the works," said Corvedal, "doing nothing, at great length, looking at his feet, and everybody is obliged to go round him." "That is a slander. He has been there since June, and he has never once put in a bill." "Which is precisely the mark of the very worst kind, and you may take that from a man who has had 2 of them at his table." "Then he is not a commissioner," she said. "He is a curate, standing about in grey with his hands behind him, waiting for somebody to die. He is a commissioner. He is a curate, and I will tell you why. A commissioner would have brought another one." He laughed. It was the first time she had heard it, and it was not a graceful noise. It came out of him sideways, as though something had given way that had been propped up for a long while, and it went on longer than the joke was worth. The heron, at the sound, took itself off the water and beat away down the meadow, and they both watched it go, and neither of them said anything, and neither of them got up. "Ockley," he said at last, "Sir, would you object to being asked a foolish question? I would want to hear it first. When you were a girl," he said, "at 4 in the morning, with the lantern, did you like it?" Marjorie thought about that honestly, because he had asked it honestly. "I loved it," she said. "There is a thing about a meadow in the dark, when the water is going over it. You cannot see it, you can only hear it, and it is not like rain and it is not like a river. It is a sort of whispering all over the ground at once, everywhere, in every direction, like a field full of people being quiet. And you stand there in the middle of it with a lantern, and you know that in 11 weeks there will be grass a foot high where you are standing, because of the boards you moved. There is nothing else like it in the world, and there are about 9 people left alive who have heard it." 8, he said. "I have heard it. He carried me down." "I know," said Marjorie. "The shepherd told me." And he did not flinch off it, and he did not explain it, and he did not fill the silence up with anything, and after a while she said that the commissioner had a wife at the Millpool, which was an invention, and he said that would account for the hours he kept, and they went on with that for a quarter of an hour longer while the bread got hard, and it was when she went over it afterwards the happiest afternoon she had had since her father died. Dorcas Prideaux came up to the head of the meadow on the 15th of August, with a basket over her arm and her hip going, and a face on her like a woman about to do something disagreeable. "Bilberries," she said, and put the basket down on the wall. "There is a pie's worth if you have got an oven, and if you have not got an oven you may eat them out of your hand like a heathen, which is what I do." "That is kind," said Marjorie. "It is not kind, it is owed, and I would rather have it settled." Dorcas sat down on the wall without being asked, which took her a while. 4 years that corner of my garden has been sour. 4 years. I have told Mr. Bicknell about it every Michaelmas, and he has written it in his book and been very civil about it. And you came past with a shovel, and you were 30 minutes, and now the wet goes away. It was a blind drain. The fall was there. Somebody had put a stone in it and forgot. I do not care what it was, said Dorcas. I have got potatoes. She looked out over the meadow with her jaw set. I have not been civil to you, and I will say why. Because you will hear it from somebody worse. I said you were his fancy. I said it in my own kitchen, and I said it to 2 other women in the lane, and one of them will have carried it further. And I am ashamed of it. And there it is. Marjorie went on winding the line she was winding. That is what I would have thought, she said. It is not what you would have thought. It is exactly what I would have thought, said Marjorie, and I will tell you why it is not true, and then you may believe it or not, and either way I would like the bilberries. He has not once come down that bank without a reason he could say out loud in front of the shepherd. He asks me what a thing costs, and I tell him, and he pays it, or he does not. That is the whole of it. I am 23, and I am plain, and I have got mud to the elbow, and no people, and a man in his position does not want a woman like me for that, because a woman like me is not convenient for it. Whatever else I am short of, I am not short of a mirror. Then you are short of eyes, said Dorcas. I have got eyes. You have got eyes for water, said Dorcas, and none at all for anything upright. She stood up, in stages. Well, I have said what I came to say, and I have said something else besides, which was not in the plan. Bring the basket back when you have done with it, and if you want an oven, mine draws well, and I am up at 5. I am up at 4, said Marjorie. Then you will be waiting, said Dorcas, and went off down the path. And the following week, Marjorie ate her dinner in that kitchen twice, and by September she had a chair in it that was understood to be hers. The storm came on the last night of July, and it did not come to the meadow at all. That was the thing nobody outside the valley ever understood about it afterwards. There was no rain on the estate. There was a hot, black evening, and a wind that turned the willow's white side out, and thunder somewhere north over the chalk, 20 miles off, on ground that drained into their river and nobody's else. Marjorie was at the head at 9:30 with a lantern, because she did not like the smell of the air, and the river had come up 4 inches while she stood there, and it was not brown yet, and that was what frightened her, because the brown was still coming. She ran the whole mile to the house. "Where is the danger?" said Corvedale in the doorway, with his shirt open. The bank of the carrier at the elbow, where the mud was worst, and the bank is newest, and it is not knitted yet. If that goes at the top, the whole river comes out of the channel in one place, and goes down the meadow in a lump, and cuts it to gravel like the last one, and we lose the ground, not the grass, the ground, and it does not come back in your lifetime. How long have we got? 2 hours. Perhaps 3. What does it want? It wants the head hatch opened to the full, and every gutter down the meadow opened with it, she said, so that the water goes out over the whole 40 acres a half-inch deep, and finds 1,000 ways down instead of one. And it wants that elbow held with turf and hurdles while it does. I want every hurdle on this estate, and I want them now. He did not ask her a single further question, and she remembered that afterwards for the rest of her life. They worked from 11 until 4:30 in the morning, and it was Silas and Reuben and 2 of the men from the top farm at first, and the moon went in about 1 and did not come out again. Silas broke the hurdles out of the fold and carted them down 4 at a time, with the horse going by feel. Reuben drove them in along the elbow with a beetle, and Marjorie cut turves off the headland with the mended shovel and laid them grass down against the hurdles, which is the way it is done, and the reason it is done that way is that the grass roots knit into the bank and hold, and Corvedale carried them 60 pounds at a time in his arms 300 yards for 5 hours. At 2 the water came brown, and they heard it before they saw it, a low unbroken noise up the valley like a cart on a bridge. "Open the head," she shouted, and he went up the bank and stood at the boards with his hands on the top one and looked back at her, because of the condition, because nobody but her. "Draw it," she said. "Draw it, all of it. I am giving it to you. Draw it now." And he drew it, board after board, with the river coming over his knees, and the water went out of the throat into the carrier, and down the meadow through every gutter she had opened, spreading and thinning as it went. And the noise of it going over the grass in the dark was exactly the noise she had described to him under the hedge in the sunshine, on a scale neither of them had ever heard in their lives. The elbow held. It sagged 18 inches at 4 in the morning, and they laid on 4 more courses of turf, and it held. And at some time after 5, when it was grey and the river was going down, and the whole meadow lay under a sheet of water 1/2 inch deep with the sky in it, the 2 of them sat down on the bank in the wet, because their legs had stopped. "There is a heron on my post," said Corvedale. "That is the commissioner. He is inspecting the works. He is welcome to them." His hands were shaking, and he was looking at them with detached interest. Marjorie reached over and took the nearer one and turned it up to the light, which was the first time she had touched him, except to be handed across a plank, and the palm was open across the base of the fingers, where the hurdle wire had been through it, and it was full of grit. "That wants washing tonight, and not tomorrow," she said, and did not let go of it at once, and he did not take it back at once. And the sun came up on the other side of the valley and lit 40 acres of standing water, so that the whole meadow burned white from end to end, and neither of them said anything about that either. "Nobody has called me anything but Corvedale since I was 19, he said, out of nowhere, to the meadow. "My name is Alfred. It is a perfectly ordinary name. I have not heard it out loud in 11 years, and I find I miss it." She did not use it. She only sat there with the shovel across her knees, and the water went over the ground in every direction at once, whispering the way it does. And there we are, halfway, with the sun coming up on a flooded meadow, and 2 exhausted people too proud to say a word. Wherever this finds you tonight, is it quiet where you are? Is there rain on the glass? Is there a kettle on? Stay with them a while. The best of it is still ahead. The gauge board was the 3rd gift, and it undid her completely. In the last week of August, she came down to the head at 2 in the morning, as she had done twice a week all summer, because the mill downstream drew hardest in the small hours, and the river dropped then, and the reading she took at dusk was a lie. She had been going into the water in the dark with a candle stub, and feeling for her own mark on the post with her thumb, and she had told absolutely nobody. Because there was nobody, it would have been anything but a nuisance to tell. There was a board set in the river against the stonework, painted white, with the figures cut into it and blacked so that they would hold a light. There was a stake driven at the top of the bank with an iron hook on it at the height of a hand, and there was a plank seat, 2 feet long, set into the bank at the exact place where a person could sit and see the board without going into the water at all. Marjorie stood in the dark and put her hand over her mouth and kept it there for some time. He had not asked her what she wanted. He had not come down and said, "I have observed that you go out at night." If he had said one word of it, she could have thanked him and gone on. But he had watched her for weeks, from somewhere at 2 in the morning, and had gone away and had a thing made, and had put it in the ground while she slept, and had told nobody, and would never mention it as long as he lived. She sat down on the plank and read the river off the board, because that was what she had come for, and wrote the figure in her book, and the figure was 4 inches down on the dusk reading, and she wrote that down too, and then she sat there until 3 with her hands in her lap. The 3rd meeting was that same week, and it advanced nothing at all. He came down at 2 in the morning on the Thursday, because he had a lantern and no explanation, and he sat on the other end of a plank meant for 1 person, and they read the river together, and he asked her what the figures meant, and she told him, and then for an hour they talked about nothing whatever. About whether a man could learn to sleep in 2 halves, about his mother, who had kept a hedgehog in the still room and fed it on bread and milk, and lied about it to a bishop. About the exact sound of the mill hatch 2 miles down, which they could both just hear when the wind came from that quarter, and how Marjorie had grown up thinking that noise was made by the night itself, and had been 11 before she found out it was machinery. "You have not asked me for anything since June," he said. "Not once. Everybody who comes near me asks me for something, and I have got so used to it that I answer before they begin. And you have never begun. I asked you for £9 for elm. That was for the ground." "It is all for the ground," said Marjorie. "Yes," he said, after a moment. "I know." Bicknell came to the cottage on the 1st of September with a lamp of his own. "I will not keep you," he said, and sat down in the chair by the cold grate as though it were his, which in a manner of speaking it was. "You have done more than I expected. I am not too small a man to say it. That carrier is a piece of work." "Thank you," said Marjorie, standing. "Sit down. Sit down. We are not on the bank now." She sat. "I have been 19 years in this place. Do you know what 19 years is? It is watching a family come apart slowly and holding the pieces together with string and never once being thanked for the string." He turned his hat round in his hands. "There is a question I have been asked twice this fortnight by people whose good opinion you will want. It is this: in whose interest is it that the meadows are floated? And there is only one answer, and it is his. And yet the money that is being spent is not his either. It is the tenants, because it is not being spent on their roofs." "That is a fair question," said Marjorie. "Ask it in daylight, and I will answer it in front of them. I am giving you the chance to answer it in the dark, which is a courtesy." He set the hat down. "Let me be plain with you, because you like plainness. There is a way this ends well for you. The mill wants water. It has wanted water for 9 years, and it has had it, and there has been peace in this valley on that account, and no lawyer in it. You have taken that water away. In a dry summer you have taken it away, and the miller has been to me twice, and the second time he came with a paper in his hand. The estate has a right to that water. The estate has a right to it from Monday morning to Saturday noon, and I know that, Miss Ockley, I have known it since before you were born." He said it pleasantly still. "But rights are one thing, and neighbours are another, and a man of law is a third thing again. And if it goes to law, this estate has £200 it has not got, and it will be your works that took it. What I am saying to you is this: shut the head 3 days a week, and I will see that you are kept on, and that the meadow is finished, and that you have a wage in the winter when there is nothing to do out there and no other soul in this county will employ you. 3 days. Nobody would ever know." "I would know," said Marjorie. "The grass would know. It is the same thing. That is a very fine sentiment for a woman with 4 shillings. It is not a sentiment. It is arithmetic. A meadow does not care what you meant. It only counts what it got." Bicknell sat quite still, and something went out of his face, not anger, but the effort of the pleasantness, so that for a second she saw what was under it, which was a tired, frightened man of 60 with a house and a daughter and a place he had held for 19 years by making himself necessary. "You have no idea," he said quietly, "what it costs to be the only person who says no in a house like this. He is loved for spending. I am hated for the accounts. And a girl comes up a footpath in June and says a word about moss, and 19 years is a heap of mud on a bank." "I did not name you," said Marjorie. "I said I did not know who, and it was not my business who." "You are learning," said Bicknell, and picked up his hat and went out, and she stood in the doorway and watched his lamp go up the lane, and was not frightened exactly, but she went and looked at the head hatch twice that night, and both times the boards were as she had left them. He touched it in company 9 days later at the door of the church, with 4 tenants and the curate in earshot, when the miller's wife had said the water was low. "The estate's works are entirely legal, ma'am," Bicknell said, "and I am satisfied there is nothing in the drowner's conduct that anybody could take exception to, whatever hours she may keep." And he raised his hat to Marjorie and went on in to his pew, and it was so lightly done that half of them did not catch it, and Dorcas Prideaux caught it, and looked after him with her mouth shut hard. The night she understood it was warm, and there was no wind at all. It was the 16th of September, and the aftermath had come up thick and green on the ground they had watered after hay, so that the meadow at dusk was the only green thing in a valley gone the colour of a biscuit, and she had walked the whole of it and found nothing wrong, which was why she was in trouble. Work had been keeping her upright since June. It had run out for an evening, and she sat down on the plank seat at the head with the lantern unlit beside her, and let the thing catch up. She loved him. That was not in doubt, and she did not waste any time on it. She had known it in the yard in August, when he had come round the corner, and her whole body had turned over like a coin, and she had gone on cutting turf. What she made herself do, sitting there, was the other thing. She added it up honestly, the way she would add up a fall of ground, because she had never in her life been able to leave a thing unmeasured. He had made her a bridge at the place where she was tired. He had had her father's shovel mended and not replaced. He had put a board in the river so she need not go into it in the dark. Any woman in England would have read those 3 things one way, and she had read them that way herself for about a fortnight, and then she had learned what Halloway's was. And there it was. There was no other reading once you knew it. He had stood on a bank at 19 and told an old man who understood water that he was wrong, in front of everybody, and turned him off for it. And the man had died at Ilsington, waiting for a word that never came, and the word could not be sent now, and nothing in this world could be sent to Ilsington now. And then a woman had come up the same footpath, with the same trade and the same shovel, and had told him about the water, and he had done for her every single thing he had not done for Halloway's. He had believed her the first time. He had paid for the elm. He had given her the hatch and let her keep it. He had carried turf for 5 hours in the dark and asked her nothing. That was not love. That was a man settling a debt with the only creditor left in the county who would take it. She turned it over twice, looking for the flaw in it, and could not find one. And she had never been able to lie to herself about a level. And the worst of it, the thing that made her put her hand flat on the plank, was that it meant the kindness would stop. Not cruelly, not all at once. But a debt that is paid, and one day it would be paid. And he would look up from the map and be a duke of 31, who had done right at last, and she would be the woman who had happened to be standing there while he did it, and it would not be his fault, and she would have to be glad of it, because she had helped. She sat with that for a long while. The heron came down the meadow and stood in the shallow at the head, grey in the last of the light. Well, said Marjorie, out loud to it. Then she picked up the lantern and went in, and wrote the river up in her book, down 2 inches, dry week, no rain since Friday, and put the book on the shelf beside the tally stick, and washed her face, and went to bed, and was at the low drains at 4:10 in the morning, which was where she was supposed to be. The audit was held on the 29th of September in the estate room, because Michaelmas is when the accounts of a place are opened, whether anybody wants them opened or not. There were 19 people in that room. There were 7 tenants, and the miller and the miller's son, and the curate, and Silas by the door with his hat in both hands, and Reuben on a chair he had brought himself, and Dorcas Prideaux, who had walked 1.5 miles on her hip to be there, and had told 2 people on the way that she had come about her potatoes. Corvedale sat at the head of the table. Bicknell had the books at his right hand, and had been reading out of them for 40 minutes in his pleasant, warm voice. And that brings us, he said, to the meadows, and to a matter I have no pleasure in raising. Then raise it, said Corvedale. The mill has served notice on this estate. The claim is £200. He let it sit. Somebody's chair creaked. The ground of it is that water has been taken out of the river into the estate's carrier on Sundays, which is the mill's day, and has been since the reign of the last king, but 2. Not once, repeatedly, through the whole summer, at night, when no man could see it done. And I am obliged to tell this room that there is only one person who has had the handling of that hatch since June, by her own condition, made publicly on that bank in front of witnesses, that nobody should touch a board but herself. He turned to her, almost gently. I am sorry, Miss Auckley, he said. I did what I could. Every face in the room went to the head of the table. Marjorie saw it happen. She saw the tenants look at Corvedale, and she saw the miller look at him, and she saw Silas look at him, and she saw him sit there with his hands flat on the wood and his face like a shut door, and she watched him not speak for what she afterwards understood was about 4 seconds, and what felt at the time like the length of a winter. Let her answer it, he said. So she stood up in the middle of 19 people and answered it herself. I will be short. said Marjorie, because it is short. On Saturday at noon I drop the boards at the head, and the river goes down to the mill hole and untouched. And on Monday at first light I draw them again. I have done that every week since the 22nd of June, and I have missed none. That is my word, and my word is not worth £200 to anybody in this room, so I will not ask you to take it. I will ask you to come outside and count. Count what? Said the miller. The bank of the Carrier, she said. That river comes off chalk. Chalk water carries a fine white silt and drops it the moment it stops moving. Every Saturday noon when I shut the head, what is in that channel stands still and sinks away over Sunday, and the chalk in it dries on to the side of the cut as a white rim at the level it stood at. It sets hard by Monday. It will not wash off after that. You can go and scrape at one with your thumbnail. And every week the river is lower than the week before, so each rim is a little below the last one, and they lie down the wall of that channel one under another like the rungs of a ladder. She put her hands on the back of the chair. There have been 12 Saturdays since the hay came off. There are 12 rungs. If I had drawn that hatch on any Sunday of this summer, the running water would have taken the new rim off before it had set, and there would be a rung missing out of the middle of that ladder, and you could put your finger in the gap. Sir, there is no gap. Go and look at it with the miller, and count them yourselves, and do not take my counting for it. The ground has kept the register. I only cut the ditch it kept it in. Nobody moved for a moment. Then the miller stood up and said, I will look at that, in the voice of a man who's been told something interesting about his own trade, and the whole room went out of the house and down the lane and along the top of the meadow in the September sun, 19 people, the curate holding his hat on. They counted 12. The miller's son counted them twice, and said 12 both times. The miller crouched on the bank, with his coat trailing in the grass, and put his thumbnail to the third one down, and it did not mark. Marjorie walked 20 paces further along the bank, and stopped. While you are all here, she said, there is the other thing, and it is not mine, and I would rather it was not. But it is standing in front of you, and it has been all summer. She pointed at the heap. 200 yards of it, dark and settled, and going green on the crown, with willow herb rooted in the top of it. That is what came out of that channel between June and August. That is 9 years of standing mud, and I have the depth of it in my book, and any drowner in England would give you the same reading off the face of that heap. A carrier that is scoured every year cannot make a heap like that in 9. It cannot make it in 19. There has been no shovel in that ditch since the year Holloway's was turned off. The name went across the meadow like a change of light. And I understand, said Marjorie, that this estate has paid for scouring every year. £32 a year, said Corvedale. He had not moved from the top of the bank. It is in the book Mr. Bicknell has under his arm. Bicknell said that work was contracted out, and I cannot answer for every. To who? Said Silas from the back, very loud, in the voice of a man who has been holding something in for 9 years and has just felt it come loose. There is no man in this valley but me carts mud, and I have not carted a barrowful off that meadow since my father died. And you know it, and you have got my hand in that book for wages I never had. That is a serious thing to say to a man in front of his employer, said Bicknell. I have said it. And then Dorcas Prideaux said, from the middle of the crowd, without stepping forward, because she could not have stepped forward on that hip. The Mills man comes to your door on the quarter day. Bicknell turned round. I do your washing, Mr. Bicknell, said Dorcas. I have done it 11 years, and I am not ashamed of it, and I hold my house at your word, and I know exactly what I am doing this minute, and I am doing it anyway. He comes the evening before the quarter day, every quarter, since the year the meadow was let go, and he does not come to the office. He comes to the back. And I have never known what it was, and I have never asked, and I have said nothing to a living soul. And I am saying it here because that girl carried my water up a hill and did not tell anybody. The miller straightened up off the bank very slowly and said nothing at all, which was louder than speech. 3 guineas a quarter, said Bicknell. He had not meant to say it. Marjorie saw the exact moment it left him. He had opened his mouth to begin another sentence entirely. The reasonable one, the one about neighbors and about peace in a valley. And what came out was the figure, because it had been sitting behind his teeth for 9 years. It was 3 guineas a quarter for the head to stay shut, he said, and it was the cheapest bargain this estate ever made, and there is not one of you fit to understand it. There was no money. There was no money in 18, and there is none now. That meadow wanted a man at £90 a year, and a horse and elm and the whole of it, and there was none. And I found 3 guineas a quarter under a stone, and I put it into your roofs, into yours. He turned on the tenants, and his voice went up and would not come back down, and it had stopped being pleasant, and without the pleasantness there was very little of it. 19 years I have kept this place standing. 19 years, and every one of you has had something out of my hand, and you stand there. He stopped. He had seen their faces. That was the worst part, and it was over quickly. The plausible voice went first, and then the rest of him went quiet. And he stood in the sun on the bank of the carrier, with his hat in his hand, among people he had known for 19 years. And none of them was angry, which was what finished it. They only looked at him and waited, the way people wait at the end of a thing. You will give the books to the curate this afternoon, said Corvedale, and go to your daughters, and my solicitor will write to you about what is to be repaid, and it will be repaid. Yes, said Bicknell. He looked at Marjorie then. It was not much of a look, it did not ask for anything, because he was too old a hand to ask in front of a crowd, but it was there. She did not say a word. She stood with her hands at her sides on the bank she had made, and let the room do what rooms do, and it cost her more than speaking would have, and Bicknell went up the meadow alone through the thistle, with all of them watching, and out at the top gate, and did not look back. She was packed by 9 that night, which took no time at all, because it never had. Reuben found her at it. He came in without knocking with a lantern and the dog, and stood the lantern on the shelf next to the tally stick, and looked at the box. That is quick, he said. There is not much of it. He does not know. He will in the morning. I am not creeping off. I will say good-bye in the yard. She folded the shawl and put it in flat. The meadow is done, Reuben. The carrier is open, and the drains run, and the ridges want making up, and any decent man can make a ridge from the pattern of the ones I have done. He does not want a drowner at £90 a year. He wants a shepherd and a roof and no more talk, and he has just found out in front of 19 people what the last 9 years cost him, and I am the woman who counted it out for him on a bank in the sunshine. That is not why you are going. No, said Marjorie. She sat down on the box. I am going because he was good to me for a reason, she said, and the reason has been paid now. He owed a man he cannot pay, and I came up the path with the same shovel, and he has been paying me instead all summer, and today it went as far as it goes. The name got said out loud in front of the whole estate, and there is nothing owing any more. It is not a wicked thing. It is the kindest thing he has got. But I have watched water all my life, and I know when a thing has finished running. And you would rather go than see it stop. I would rather go than stand about being the last of it. She looked at the grate. My father used to say that nothing keeps by being held on to. Hold water and it sours what it is lying on and kills the grass under it. The only good it ever does is while it is moving over the ground and away. I have got a thing I have been holding since August. It has been standing on me long enough. I would sooner let it over the ground and go on. Reuben sat down on the other end of the box, which was not built for it, and neither of them said anything for a while, and the dog put its chin on her foot. You will want a character, he said at last. I shall write you one, and it will be a disgrace. Because I write like a hen. I will take it, said Marjorie. He went at 10:30, and she blew the lantern out and lay down on the bed frame with the shawl over her, and did not sleep, and heard the water going through the head hatch all night, which was a sound she had put there. He came at 6 in the morning into a yard with 8 people in it. Silas had the cart and her box was on it. Dorcas had come up with bread tied in a cloth. Reuben was leaning on the wall with the character in his hat, and there were the 2 men from the top farm, and the boy and the woman who did the dairy, all of them out early on purpose, and none of them pretending otherwise. Corverdale stopped 10 feet away and stood there with his hands at his sides, and the whole yard looking at him. You are on that cart, he said. I am. I have got this to say, and I am not going to say it well. He stopped. He started again somewhere else entirely. Yesterday in the meadow, when he said your name and the whole of that room turned round and looked at me. His jaw worked. There was a thing I said to myself when I was 19, that I would never again be the man who spoke first in front of a room. I have kept it. I kept it yesterday. I sat there and I said, let her answer it. I said it in that voice, my father's voice, the flat one, and I let you stand up in the middle of 19 people on your own and defend your own name. And I told myself while I did it that I was being careful. Sir, I was not being careful. I was frightened. It was the one thing I could have done for you in 11 years, and I did not do it. And I have had a night with that. He put a hand up and took it down again. I am not asking to be excused it. I am asking whether you would stay. Not for the meadow. There is no, he stopped dead, and had to start again and got it out plain. There is no money, and there is a heap of mud, and a bare patch by the willow that will be bare when we are dead. I am asking whether you would stay and have me. Nobody in that yard breathed. You said 4 seconds, said Marjorie, which was not what she had meant to say. I did not count them, he said. I would not know how many there were. I only know I sat there. She got down off the cart. There is a condition, she said, and it is the same one. Nobody lifts a board but you. Nobody lifts a board but me, said Marjorie, unless I give it to them. And put her hand out, and he took it in front of all of them, which cost him more than the rest of it put together. They were married in November in the church at the top of the lane, and the curate, who had been at the audit, read it out with a good deal of feeling. Silas gave her away, because there was nobody else, and because Reuben said he was not going to, and then wept steadily through the whole service from the second pew. Dorcas Prideaux made the cake, and told everybody in the porch that she had said from the first that there was nothing in it, which was so magnificent a lie that nobody corrected her. And she kept her cottage and her potatoes, and the chair by her fire that was understood to be Marjorie's, and came up to the house on Sundays for the rest of her life. Bicknell went to his daughters at Ilsington, of all places in England, and repaid £90 over 4 years out of a small annuity, and was not prosecuted, and lived 11 years more, and kept a bee garden that was spoken well of. The estate never had £200 off him, because it never asked for it, and the miller withdrew his claim in October, and took his water Saturday noon to Monday morning, as he had always been entitled to, and the two houses did business afterwards on perfectly civil terms, which is the way of valleys. Reuben had 400 ewes on to the early bite in the 2nd week of March, a fortnight before any other flock in that country, and stood at the gate, and watched them go down onto green grass with his hat off, and said one sentence about Hallowise that nobody wrote down. And on the 12th of October, before any of that, in the first cold weather, Marjorie Ockley walked down to the head of the water at 4 in the morning with a lantern and her father's shovel, and the Duke of Corvedale carrying the second lantern behind her, to put the water on for the winter for the first time in 9 years. She looked the whole length of the carrier by lantern light, and the drains, and the 12 white rungs going down the wall of the cut, which she had left exactly where they were and never scraped off. "Well," he said, "tell me what is wrong with my estate." "Nothing," said Marjorie. "Nothing is wrong with it." He put his hands on the top board of the hatch and looked back at her over his shoulder the way he had looked back on the night of the storm. "May I?" "Nobody lifts a board but me," she said, "unless I give it to them." "Lift it," and he drew the boards up one after another, and the river came out of its own channel into the carrier and went away down the long dark meadow, and split and spread and found the 1,000 little gutters, and came up out of them and went over the grass in a sheet 1/2 an inch deep in every direction at once, and the noise of it came back up the valley to the two of them standing at the head, with their lanterns, all over the ground, everywhere, like a field full of people being quiet. So there it is. What have you got standing in you tonight, some old thing you have been holding on to, that would do a great deal more good let out over the ground and gone? Think about it while the kettle boils, and then come back and sit with me again, and we will find somebody else worth the walking home.